I'm going to go over the startup operation and do some explaining about the machine so you have maybe a fuller understanding on how the operation works and some of the aspects you should know about it. We start out with, we do have two palm buttons. When you start to fill, you do need to hold both palm buttons in until you see the fill starting. Then you can release the palm buttons. Emergency stop, when its fill is completed, you just push the emergency stop. You will hear some air releasing at that time, but hold the emergency stop in, there's delay, and then the head will come up. The delay is in here so it gives the material time to settle. So when the head comes up, we don't get an overflow of material. The material flows through these two dispense valves, A side and B side, and they have a snuff back value in here of about 10 milliliters each. So the snuff back removes the pressure from the cartridge when it's being filled so we don't get leaking out the top again. The first thing that happens when I turn the air pressure up, and we use 80 pounds of PSI on the air pressure gauge for the system, you'll notice the head comes up. This machine is still a machine, it's still in progress. It will work just fine for my presentation. We just have not tied all the hoses into place yet and completely finished it. It is an operating machine. Things we need to know about the safety features of the machine so we don't make a spill or start to fill a cartridge when there's no cartridge in place or the pistons aren't pushed all the way to the top. On either side here we have two sensors. These sensors detect that there is a piston in place. Without a piston in place in both of these, the machine will not operate. This machine doesn't have electricity to it yet. It takes 110, but you'll see when you push this in on the operating machine, this light will come on and this light will be green, and then when you push this in, this light will also turn orange to tell you that both pistons are in place. At that point, you still can't operate the machine with the palm buttons. It's shut off. So there's one more switch that has to be pushed, and it's this part placement switch here. When you put the cartridge in, the part placement switch is pushed in. Now the palm buttons are activated and the machine will operate. So remember, without two pucks in place, or two pistons in place, and your cartridge, these palm buttons will not operate. Okay, I'm all set up here. I'll move to the side and show you the controls that are on the side. Okay, we're looking at the side of the machine now where we have some controls. Your controls are labeled a little bit different. Your controls are labeled head down delay, head up delay, and system timer. Okay, the system timer does not need to be touched, neither would the head up delay or the head down delay. The head down delay is here in case you need to control the head coming down before the pistons are pushed all the way forward. The head up delay is here to allow, when you push the stop button, to raise the head up after the fill is completed, to allow there to be a delay so the material has time to settle before the head comes up, dragging material with it. System timer is basically always preset to D. It has a function to keep the palm buttons operating correctly. Now you can see I've hooked my hoses up already, and I'm going to use just one hose. I'm going to hook just one hose up, so I'm going to run water in our testing here, and I've hooked them both up to a T so both valves are getting the same feed as opposed to running two pumps, although I will explain how to start up with your pumps. Back at the control box here, we have 3 buttons. These are manual buttons and are functional at all times. You push the head down button will bring the head down. The P1 button will open up your P1 pump or your A pump, and your P2 button or your B pump will open up the B side. So, and to close those valves, you just push the red palm button once and the valves close. You hold the palm button in, and again you'll hear air escaping, which is normal. Push the palm button in again and hold it, and the head will come up after the delay. This is the delay that creates that head delay coming up. You can adjust that as necessary. So just to recap here, we have a head down delay, head up delay, and a system timer. We have our head down manual button, our P1 open, our A side open valve, and our P2, which is our B side open valve, which relates to our dispense valves delivering material. I'm going to push the head down. You can watch the head come down. And if I push P1, you can hear P1 open up. You can hear P2 open up. At this point, you've seen water come out of the nozzle. Both valves are opening up. I'm going to close both valves by pushing the red palm button. And if I hold the red palm button down, you'll hear the air escape and the head comes up. Moving to the back of the machine, there's a little slot here. It says down, up, head speed control. There's two little dials in there you can turn with a small screwdriver, flat screwdriver, to either bring the head up at a faster speed or come down at a faster speed. We do not want the head to be slamming up and down. That's why those controls are there. Now, I'm down below on the back of the machine, and you can see our controls here. I'm not going to explain what all these controls do, but I will say that these 2 valves control the up and down of the piston inserter. These 2 timers here, this is a dispense delay timer, which allows you to delay the dispensing if the head is coming down and you get a splash of material before the head is totally sealed. You can delay the dispensing of the materials, the actual opening of the valves with this delay. This is preset and should not be turned. This is a system timer on the top here. It does other functions that are complicated to understand, but it's necessary. It does not to be touched. Our regulator, we set the regulator at 80 psi by the gauge on the front. So before I get into wetting it down, we want to set the depth of our cartridge or our piston, how far we want it down. You can see I've marked a line here so I can make my adjustments through that line, or I can take a measurement from that line, and that's about a ½ inch up from the bottom, and I can measure a ½ inch up from here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to bring the piston pushers up to a ½ inch above here, and I'm going to set my limit switch on the bottom to match that. So if I push up on my bullet rod, you'll see my piston come up. This is done with the air turned off. So I have the air off and the head come down. And I'm going to push up from the bottom on my piston. I'm going to look for just this puck is a ½ inch thick, so I'm just going to bring it right down even with the top of my compression plate here, and that's where I'll set my limit switch at. And that's me pushing it up from the bottom. and that is a 1/2 inch thick. So that's where I want to set my limit switch to. Looking down below at the limit switches, you can see what I'm going to do here is I'm going to raise this up to the 1/2 inch I want, and then I'm going to move, as you can see, I'm going to move this limit switch here up so it shuts off just as that's hitting a 1/2 inch. And I'm going to loosen these 2 bolts and raise that up. So I want my limit switch to be contacting just at the same, just when I hit that 1/2 inch. And if we're filling both of them at the same level, which most of the time we are, I would just move this side up to match that. Always double check to make sure that my bullet is turning my switch, is actually pushing on the switch. If these come down and they don't push the switch all the way in, it will not shut off the valve. Then you have to use your emergency stop to stop the filling action. We have 2 sets of switches. These 2 switches down below tell the machine that the filling is complete and closes the dispense valve and the filling stops. There's 2 switches above. These 2 switches above tell the inserter when both of them are all the way up, push to the top, the pistons are in place, they'll both come up. And once they both hit those switches together, your head will come down and your filling starts. And they'll drift down slowly till they hit. There's resistance built in here till it hits the switch. One will shut off. As the other comes down and it fills, it shuts the other side off, and then they both retract straight to the bottom, past the switches. We have resistance being pushed on the back of our piston as the piston is filling the cartridge. So these will follow, the piston stays on top of our pusher and follows it down all the way to the bottom of the stroke. We create that resistance with these 2 flow controls. Each one has its own flow control, which creates resistance on the pistons as it fills and keeps the piston on top of there so we get an accurate fill every time. Directly above those 2 are 2 more. And this allows us to put a little bit of resistance and slow down the speed of pushing the pistons up if we're pushing them too fast. And there are little lock nuts on here we keep locked. You screw them right down. Now, on your larger machine, your 490s and up, if you're always using one side, your cylinders adjust back and forth like this to accommodate for the center of the cartridge. And that's done through these blocks here and here. Okay, with the air pressure back on, we're going to bleed the water, in this case, out of the lines as it spills over. And once we get the air out of the lines and we see a nice steady stream of material, I'm going to use the red palm button to shut it down. Nick, would you go ahead and turn the pump up just a little bit? I have both valves open. And that's all we needed, was just a good stream of water. Now the lines are full of material, or water in this case, then we can do our first fill. So again, 2 hockey pucks. Okay, so we've bled the air out of the lines. We're ready for our first fill. Got a little bit of water cleaned up here. And first thing I'm going to do is put in our seal. When we push in our seal, we should see our light change color. Same with this side, tells us we both have 2 seals in. The lights have changed colors. We can put our cartridge in. The cartridge always goes in with the mix pack logo to the back. These nozzles only fit in one direction. So we're going to push our palm buttons and hold it until the filling starts, and then release them. This is a note about setting our fill rate, how quickly the cartridge fills. And we want to keep the pistons with back pressure on them at all times, or as you've just seen, you'll get a short fill. So what I like to do is I'll bring these rods up with the air turned off, and I will let them just drop on its own, and I'll make sure and I'll slow it down with my speed control here a little bit and make sure it's just moving about that fast. Now I know I have some back pressure on the material as it fills. If this is coming down faster than your material is filling and we don't have the back pressure, you will get a short shot. I'm going to push this one up and do the same. Hold it up here like that. And then it'll drop on its own. I'm going to slow it down with the speed controller here so it's not moving very fast. Just about like that. Now when we get back pressure on there, the material in the cartridge will push the meter down and it'll shut off correctly at the rate level we want. Okay, I've adjusted the settings down there so our inserters follow the fill down and put back pressure on the cartridge as it's filling. We put our 2 pistons back in place, cartridge is in place. It comes up, a little bit of water, we have a good fill. If you're using a thicker material and your material is going to move slower, you may want to add more back pressure to those pistons.